All right, and the meeting is live.
Okay, welcome to the Housing Commission's March 3rd, 2021 regular meeting. This is a teleconference meeting with Housing Commission members, city staff, and members of the public participating remotely to ensure proper social distancing in this federal, state, and local emergency. I will call the meeting to order at 6:31 p.m. And I start by introducing staff and Housing Commission members present. I will skip Lauren for now. Curtis Conroy. I guess this is kind of like am I just introducing or are we
Present.
doing okay, great, thanks. Myself, the chair, and Rachel Horst, our vice chair. I see you're present. Wendy McPherson, I saw, but now I have a window blocking you.
Hello.
You are, yep, the windows around. Nevada Merriman, I see, and John Pimentel, I see. Absent for now is Lauren, and hopefully she'll figure out her connectivity and join us. Staff present our Deputy Community Development Director Rhonda Kaufman and Management Analyst 2 Mike Noche, Associate Planner Matt Pruder, and Assistant Planner Chris Turner. Housing staff member Mike Noche, would you please provide instructions to the Housing Commission and members of the public on how this meeting will proceed?
Absolutely, and thank you, Madam Chair and members of the Housing Commission. Welcome everyone to the March 3rd meeting of the Housing Commission, and thank you for attending. At this time, we ask that members of the Housing Commission please remain on screen for the duration of the meeting. You will control your own webcams and microphones. Staff will engage webcams and microphones to make presentations and to respond to members of the Housing Commission. For members of the public who are in attendance and wish to provide public comment, after the chair calls for public comment on the item you wish to speak on, please engage the raised hand feature. I will then have the ability to open your microphone and you can provide public comment to the Housing Commission. And that concludes my instructions, and I will return the meeting to the chair. Thank you.
Okay. So at this point, under public comment, the public may address the Housing Commission. And can we back up and note that Lauren Bigelow is now in attendance? We started promptly. I explained that you may or may not be able to join us. I'm so glad you're here. Okay, so under public comment, the public may address the Housing Commission on any subject not listed on the agenda. Each speaker may address the Housing Commission once under public comment for a limit of 3 minutes. Please clearly state your name and address or political jurisdiction in which you live. The Housing Commission cannot act on items not listed on the agenda, and therefore the Housing Commission cannot respond to non-agenda issues brought up under public comment other than to provide general information. Mike Noche, do we have any public comment?
One moment, thank you. So for members of the public who are in attendance and wish to provide public comment after the chair calls on the item you wish to speak on, please engage the raise hand feature. For anyone who would like to provide public comment during the general public comment period, which is right now, please use the raised hand feature. It does look like we have one hand raised, Madam Chair, so I will get our clock ready. And our first speaker will be Carol Collins. Carol, you should be able to unmute your microphone now and address the commission.
Okay. Hello, my name's Carol Collins. I live in Atherton. I'm a housing provider in Menlo Park. And I wanted to address ADUs and the parking restrictions on ADUs. I have been considering for months the idea of including one on my property on Partridge. However, I'd have to put in a big investment, and I've decided because there is no on-street parking allowed that I can't justify it because that really limits who can rent the unit. And I just want to mention that on Partridge, so my suggestion would be maybe you would consider either waivers or some sort of variance for limited on-street parking. Partridge has R2 zoning on it. It has R3 zoning, and it also has a special, I don't remember what it's called, but it's for a senior, multiple family senior housing unit. And R3, you can park overnight, you can get permits. And the senior housing, if you have a handicap parking sticker, you can park anywhere, anytime, as I understand. So it is a very mixed street. However, because mine is zoned R2, I cannot get a parking permit. So that was the suggestion, that maybe there are some exceptions might be made so that ADUs can be put in. That's really, it's just food for thought, something to think about. Because I, of course, went to planning and they said go to the police, and the police said go to planning, and I can't get overnight parking. So ADUs, they're a great idea, but I don't think they're very possible because of the parking limitations. But thank you. That's all I have to say.
Thank
Oh,
you.
Do I offer? No questions, right?
Oh, we can't respond other than I will say thank you for your comment.
Okay.
It's helpful to hear that perspective.
Thank you for listening.
You're welcome. Thanks very much. So regular business, unless there's more. Mike, did we get any more hands raised?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let me just double check. And just as a reminder for anyone who joined, if you'd like to share any general public comment to the commission, please raise your hand. Use the raised hand feature now. I'll give it another second. And not seeing any additional public comment at this time, I'll return the meeting to the chair. Thank you.
Okay. So we'll move on to regular business. And under regular business, the Housing Commission receives informational presentations in addition to considering policy matters and administrative actions. Are there any clarifying questions from Housing Commissioners on item D1, which is to approve the minutes from the Housing Commission meeting of February 3rd before we take public comment on the item? Seeing,
Question.
yes? Mm-hmm.
This is a question for, I think it's Rhonda. Given that we had a lot of conditions related to the motion and the approval of this particular, of the Greystar project, some of the conditions seem like they might be elevated to the point of action minutes. I didn't notice anything in there, but certainly the follow-up on SB 330, understanding if we could get a mix of affordability in the BMR units that Greystar proposed. Those seemed like something that we might want to document in the minutes, but perhaps is more appropriate for that just to come back to us as an informational item. Just wondering how Mike and Rhonda are planning to keep us in the loop on what happens there.
In terms of the minutes item for the agenda, the minutes just are action minutes, so they only capture the motions, seconds, and the actual recommendation, the statement of recommendation. But in terms of, I think what's separate is the Housing Commission wanting to know what maybe is transpiring and what's happening and getting some updates. I'd be happy to provide that separately.
Okay, so that means, so actually, I'm glad that Nevada asked that question because I forgot that I had the same question. Is there, can you, maybe it doesn't have to be in the minutes, but can you assure us that our comments were like, that I think we talked about perhaps our comments being reflected in the staff report for the next public meeting. And I don't know, I guess, I mean, I'm sure you will do that, but maybe just say that right now. We'll all feel better.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, exactly that. So we wouldn't include those in the minutes, but they will, that is our opportunity to share the overall comments that came from the Housing Commission. Those, that narrative will be included, a summary of will be included in the Planning Commission staff report that moves forward.
Thank you.
Okay, great. So with that, I think we can go to public comment. Is there any public comment on this item?
Thank you, Madam Chair. For members of the public who are in attendance and wish to provide public comment, please engage the raised hand feature. I will then have the ability to open your microphone and you can provide your public comment to the Housing Commission. And it does look like we have one public comment. And our first speaker will be Pam Jones. And Pam, you should be able to unmute your microphone and address the commission now.
Meeting ID followed by pound.
Yes, can you hear me well, or do I need to call in by
You have
phone?
not entered any numbers. Please
Pam, we're getting a little background noise, but we can hear you currently.
Okay, good, thank you. And Pam Jones, and thank you for taking my comment here. I just wanted to note that the minutes do not reflect accurately what I stated. I'm in favor of a land trust, not the one that was presented. And then I had lengthy, which doesn't have to be in there, but lengthy reasons as to why I commented the way that I did. So I just want that one word change, spoke in support of land trusts in general. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. So let's see. So we need a motion, and I would love to hear a motion to approve the minutes with the correction that Pam just offered.
So moved.
Okay, Nevada has moved, and second.
Second.
Okay, Kurt has second, and I'm just looking at the notes to figure out where I write this down. Okay, motion by Nevada, second by Kurt. Okay, all right, so anyone opposed? No. Anyone abstaining? No. With that, I will say that this passes unanimously. And we'll move on to item D2. Recommendation of a below market rate housing agreement term sheet with Richard Mileby. If I said that wrong, I would like to be corrected, and I'll apologize. For 3723 Haven Avenue. So the Associate Planner, Matt Pruder, will introduce item D2.
Good
Thank you,
evening.
Matt.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Housing Commissioners and members of the public. My name is Matt Pruder with the Menlo Park Planning Division, and I'm here today to talk about the Hotel Moxie project at 3723 Haven Avenue. And what you are reviewing this evening is specifically the term sheet for a proposed BMR agreement to provide an in lieu fee for the proposed development on site, which would be a new hotel that would consist of approximately, exactly 163 rooms and 58,027 square feet of overall square footage and gross floor area. And so this would be comprised, as the staff report indicates, of a mixture of podium parking on the first 3 floors, and then subsequently above that, 5 floors of hotel rooms. And there's also a ground floor sort of jump lobby that leads to the 4th floor and the hotel rooms. And also on the ground floor is a coffee shop, and it is combined, involving several approvals. The term sheet and BMR agreement ultimately is one component of this greater project. It involves a use permit and an architectural control, as well as a heritage tree removal permit for a few trees that are on site, and some requests to remove some street trees as well. And we don't have any other updates regarding this project at this time, but I'm happy to assist with any questions you may have. And we're also joined this evening by the 2 members of the applicant team, Ken Martin, as well as Richard Mileby. And I'm happy to assist with any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Rachel.
Thank you, Matt, for the presentation. I'm hoping you can fill me in where I failed to look this up myself. Obviously, the Planning Commission has the final determination when it comes to entitling this project, and I see that in there. I was just wondering, where are we at in the process in terms of Planning Commission review?
Thank you for that question, Commissioner Horst. That definitely is a more involved situation that we are hoping to proceed with over the coming few months. And basically, overall, we have taken this to the Planning Commission once before in 2019 for a study session. They reviewed the overall design and the conceptual framework of the proposed hotel and provided commentary for the applicant team. And since that time, we have been working on a few other components that I kind of highlighted. And basically, the other item I failed to mention is that there is an environmental review required for this project. It's an initial study and mitigated negative declaration based on our current assessment of the project. It's most likely that this will be what the project's required CEQA action will involve. And so that document, we are working on that now, and we are hoping to prepare it for a 30-day public review period. And that would need to occur prior to, and be completed prior to the final action meeting, which would be of the Planning Commission. And this ideally should end in a Planning Commission meeting sometime early summer, possibly June. We're thinking most likely in this year. And so we have a few months. This is one of the first items in a series. This item, we have the heritage tree removal permits, which according to the new ordinance require the appeal period for those proposed removals occur before final action. We have the 30-day review window for the CEQA document, and we have the actual Planning Commission meeting itself. And so those are really the remaining review and permitting related components before the final action is taken by the Planning Commission. And also, as with any Planning Commission decision, it is subject to a 15-day appeal period following the decision of the Planning Commission that could result in an appeal to City Council, wherein City Council would then have the authority to take action on the item. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other clarifying questions? Okay.
Oh, sorry, Karen, I just had a quick question. Yeah. When was this project originally started with the city?
Sure thing. Yes. Thank you, Commissioner McPherson. That project originally had begun in kind of a discussion form and resulted in a 2019 full submittal. And so it has been an active project for under 2 years, about a year and a half, roughly. And so we have been working with the applicant in preparing for the study session in 2019, and that was in August of 2019. And then following that, we had worked on a full resubmittal that involved all the required components. And so this involves a series of reports and other documents that help us with the CEQA analysis, as well as several iterations of the plans and other supporting documents to prepare the project for its approval process.
Thank you very much.
Any other clarifying questions, commissioners? Okay. Then I think we'll go to public comment next. Mike, do we have any public comments on this item?
Thank you, Madam Chair. For members of the public who are in attendance and wish to provide public comment, please engage the raised hand feature. I will then have the ability to open your microphone, and you can provide your public comment to the Housing Commission. And we'll just give it another second if there's any members of the public who wish to provide public comment. And not seeing any, I will return the meeting to the chair. Thank you.
Okay, so if there's any, we can now discuss this item if anybody has any comments they'd like to make. or we can hear a motion.
I think the only comment I have is related to the work this commission did last summer with respect to looking at fees and wondering, since we're seeing so many BMR agreements come through, if that is just something that is kind of pushed to the side given the current economic situation, or do we have an update as to what that means for the great number of projects we seem to be coming our way?
I would like just +1 that, because that was the thought running through my mind once again at seeing an in lieu fee. Nevada and I were on a subcommittee or ad hoc committee to propose a fee change for exactly this situation. And we had staff changes and various things happened and it got postponed. And when we were ready to get back to it, apparently, I think what we heard was that the Nexus data on which our recommendations were based was so old that it wouldn't be applicable anymore. So it's something we should have on our to-do list. And what makes it a little bit complicated is that, you know, Nevada and my work was really pretty straightforward. We looked at what the Nexus report said, and what other cities are charging, and came up with something very reasonable. The tricky part is that we don't only charge impact fees that would go into the BMR fund, we have all these other fees. So our comparison was on the housing impact fee for commercial development and didn't have the fuller context. So it is a bigger project for the city to take on, but it is overdue. And our recommendation, just to give us all an idea, would have doubled the in lieu fee for the projects that we've been hearing. Go ahead, Wendy.
I would just like to shadow what you two are saying. I think it really is a policy matter that every time some of these people come forth, it's like we're asking them after the fact, can you do this? Can you do this or that? And I really, it's a policy matter. And I think that needs to be changed. And, you know, I don't know the ins and outs of that. I don't know if doubling is right or quadrupling it or having it or whatever, but I'm all for the kind of policy change.
The record, I don't have any comments on this particular application. It's very straightforward. So.
Yeah. And to be clear, I'm not suggesting that we ask for anything different than what our policy dictates. And I don't think Nevada is either. We're just observing that it would have been great if we had updated our fees. So with that, would somebody like, oh, yes.
However,
Rachel?
the applicant would pay the fee that is in place at the time, probably prior to getting their building permit, correct? So it's possible that if there were an update in this time, we don't know what the final fee is. In other words, that the applicant is going to pay, right?
I guess that's true. So maybe our conversation is a little bit of information for the applicant.
I have a question.
I don't know. Yeah. Go ahead,
I don't know if staff can answer this, but I'm just curious. So they go through the process, and then when they're trying to apply for their permit, I don't know if you have an answer to this, but if they apply for their permit and then we tell them, oh, the policy has changed now, is that something that you're promoting, that they would be given that fact at the time they're applying for the permit, that the policy has changed?
I need to look into that a little closer, but I believe that's my understanding. If, for example, a fee changes, we would need to disclose that with the applicant. And another example of that, I don't know if we can equate this, but a common one is our transportation impact fee, the TIF. That is updated at the start of every fiscal year, July 1st. And so we always inform the applicants for which the TIF is applicable, that this could change and it could increase or decrease, but it's based on whatever time they pay relative to that date.
And that fee automatically goes up once a year, or is under review once a year, the one you just referred to?
That one is under review and could change, and generally speaking, it has trended upward, but
yearly.
I can't just say it always does. But yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you again.
And the commercial impact fee is updated like a tiny bit every year, sort of a cost of living increase. But what we were making more of a structural change to the fee rate, or we didn't, but that was the work that we were preparing to do back 3 years ago. So, I mean, it's a good question, and I don't know how, I don't know the policy on changes that are made after the process is down the road, but what, Rhonda, please comment. I mean, I agree. My interpretation is the same as Rachel's from reading the staff report.
Good discussion, and certainly your suggestion to add it to the to-do list to look back at. We'll add that to the Housing Commission's calendar. In terms of Matt was describing each year the city different fees are looked at, and usually there's an increase, including this fee gets an increase each year. But I think what you're talking about is, you know, as you mentioned, could something that could potentially double a fee or have that kind of significant impact. That is a policy decision, and so the implications of that would need to be thought through. And I've seen different approaches to that in different places where there might be an effective date. Say, you know, if the city were to adopt a different fee structure, that it would be effective to applications, say, received on a certain date on or after that date. And so any applications coming in would be notified of this change to the existing structure, as opposed to address Chairperson McPherson's comment about impacting projects that have been in the pipeline, had an application in for 1.5 years, and have been estimating their fees and putting their project together based on the existing fees with a potential small increase. Those things would need to be thought through with any kind of fee change. So hopefully that's helpful.
Thanks, Rhonda.
No. Great. Any other comments? Okay, then do I have a motion? I think we're looking for a motion to approve the BMR terms.
So moved.
Thank you, Lauren. And do I have a second?
Second.
All right. And do I have does anybody oppose? Does anybody wish to abstain? All right, unanimous number 2, the motion passes. Thank you, Matt and applicant. And
thank you.
Sure. Moving on to item D3. This is to recommend that City Council accept the 2020 Housing Element Annual Progress Report. And Mike Noche will provide a presentation for item D3.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And you should be able to see a presentation on the screen now. All right. Again, Mike Noche, Management Analyst with the Housing Division. This evening, I will provide a brief overview of the Housing Element Annual Progress Report, also known as the Housing Element APR for short. I will provide some background on the APR process, as well as some milestones from the 2020 reporting year. So the housing element is required by California state law and has been a requirement since 1969. Over the past 5 decades, there have been cycles and updates that identify housing needs throughout the state and throughout different jurisdictions. Currently, we are on our 5th cycle, which is the 2015 to 2023 period. Specific housing production figures for each region in California are identified in the RHNA process, which stands for the Regional Housing Needs Allocation. Information on the RHNA methodology comes from the California Department of Housing and Community Development, also referred to as HCD. And they work very closely with ABAG, which is the Association of Bay Area Governments. The current cycle, which is the 2015 to 2023 cycle, Menlo Park's RHNA numbers are 655 dwelling units, and I'll go into more detail on how that breaks down. And then every year, another part of our requirements as a city is to submit an annual progress report, which is due by April 1st. And that documents housing production in Menlo Park. So the APR tracks the life cycle of a project, from entitlements to building permits to certificate of occupancy. For 2020, we have 256 net new dwelling units, and again, that is based on building permits. There were 2 projects, 500 El Camino Real, also known as Middle Plaza, with a total of 215 units, 8 of which are BMR. And then the 1540 El Camino Real, which had 27 units and 5 BMRs. I also wanted to mention that Chris Turner is also joining us and will be available from our planning division. He'll be available. So Chris and I worked on putting together the APR for 2020, and Chris took the lead on pulling together numbers. So as it relates to housing production status, he'll be available after the presentation for any questions that do arise. Also wanted to mention that Menlo Park does still fall under the SB 35 exemption. We're part of one of 30 jurisdictions who are maintaining our RHNA production. So we're on track to potentially meet our goals. And I'll go into more detail on the next slide as far as the production numbers. As far as part of our building permits that were issued this year, there were 26 total, 13 of which were ADUs. So that's an increase of 9 units from the previous year. And we mostly attribute that to additional outreach, but also mainly updates in state law, which aim to have a little more streamlining. So as far as the breakdown of how year to year, what our numbers have looked like, and this is per income level. So to date, we're for our very low that did not change from last year, we're still just under 64% of completed. For the low, we went from 42% in 2019 to 62% this year. So we're at 62% of complete, and moderate is still pretty far behind at 7%. So we still have, so the column in green, excuse me for not mentioning this first to start off on this slide. The column in green is our allotment for this cycle. And further to the right, you'll see total remaining for each of those. Above moderate, we've exceeded by quite a bit. And I'm happy to go back to the slide if questions arise after the presentation. So as far as milestones that we've included in the staff report that were part of the 2020 calendar year, and these are typically pulled from Table D in the APR. For September 2020, the City Council, this was an item that went, I believe, directly to City Council, increased funding for the 1300 Willow Road project to a total of $9.331 million for that project. And that is scheduled, I believe, to start construction this year. And that'll be 58 net new BMR units. And I believe that's targeted for extremely low and very low income households. In November of 2020, as you all know, the city released the 2020 Notice of Funding Availability, otherwise known as the NOFA. Those funds are comprised of the BMR Housing Fund And Rhonda and our applicants will go into more detail in the next item on the Housing Commission agenda. One item, so we did receive 3 proposals as part of that NOFA release. One of the projects was actually approved already for $5.5 million dollars in funding, and that was for the acquisition of 6-8 Coleman Place, which will add 14 low-income units, and that was brought forth by the HIP Housing Development Corporation, which is the development arm of HIP Housing. And Rhonda will provide some background on that in the next item as well. Other milestones this year, a lot of work was done within the homeless outreach team, which is made up of the housing division staff, police department staff, and then also worked very closely with Life Moves, which is a local nonprofit. The city also supports Heart, Samaritan House, and HIP Housing in regards to homeless services and just providing housing programs that promote housing stability. The city also was integral, and Caltrans and other agencies were involved, and I believe East Palo Alto as well, and some of the coordination of a homeless encampment that was along Bayfront Expressway between Willow and University. There were about 60 individuals, and the basically resources were provided, as well as some cleanup of the area. There were 6 individuals in early 2021 that were still on the site that Life Moves is working with individually, but that number has decreased quite a bit as far as folks either some relocated and chose not to go into programs, whereas others did take up the opportunity to move into shelters. So I believe part of the coordination process was to hopefully move every individual into a shelter or program. So that's always our goal, to bring that stability. As far as grants that were awarded in 2020, Senate Bill SB2 was a planning grant program. $160,000 was awarded to the city for programs that help accelerate housing production. So those will be items that the awarding went, awarded. We were awarded the money in 2020, and then staff will be working on some of the initiatives, which those 2 initiatives that staff submitted as part of the application was to encourage ADU development and then potential zoning amendments as well. The city also received $150,000 from the local early action planning LEAP grant. So that actually goes towards some of the preparation of the 6th RHNA cycle, which is a very time intensive and expensive process. And I'll go into a little more detail about looking ahead in our next slide. So as I mentioned, the next housing element cycle, which will be our 6th cycle, will go from 2023 to 2031. In March so this month, an interview panel will be assessing or interviewing consultant firms. The panel is comprised of 2 council members, 2 planning commission members, 1 housing commissioner, which I believe is our Madam Chair Grove, and 2 members of staff, one of which being our Deputy Community Development Director, Rhonda Kaufman. Once the firm is selected, they will lead the process, which is a very time intensive, as I mentioned, and a very complex process of updating our next housing element. And the previous housing elements are on the city's website, which can be located at menlopark.org/housing for more information. As far as what we're expecting in the 6th cycle of the RHNA, and more information as far as some of the methodology for San Mateo County specific can be found on the 21 Elements website, who we work closely with many of the cities throughout San Mateo County, but 3,000 units is what's expected for Menlo Park, and then the county as a whole at roughly around 47,688 units. So that's my overview of our RHNA process, or excuse me, the annual progress report. happy to answer any questions. And myself and, as I mentioned, Chris Turner from our planning division are available. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Commissioners, do you have any clarifying questions? Wendy?
Yeah, just one. Does the hiring of consultants, is that something that's always done with the housing element?
Thank you, Commissioner McPherson. Yes, I believe that is a pretty typical thing, and many cities and jurisdictions do need some assistance. It's just really a matter of staff resources is part of the aspect. If the city were to take on that in-house, it would be pretty time extensive. So
Yeah.
I believe that's pretty common from city to city.
Yeah. And they just hire not one consultant, but one company?
So my understanding, and Rhonda can correct me if I'm wrong, but the way it will work is that this consultant will take the lead on all of the planning process, and they may even contract out certain aspects as needed.
Okay, thank you.
Kurt, go ahead.
I was just wondering on the homeless outreach team, whether or not there was a particular member of the police department that is focusing on that in particular, and who that might be, if so.
So I don't have a, I know there was a recent change. I believe our existing member of the police department may have just changed. So I actually don't have that information offhand, but I see Rhonda's may have the answer to that question. Thank you, Rhonda.
Yeah, so that group is a subcommittee, a city council subcommittee for the Ravenswood Triangle, and it's composed of multiple jurisdictions. And from the city of Menlo Park, it's involved the police chief and as well as other commanders and captains on the police force for different activities.
And we have a new police chief starting just now, right?
On March 22nd.
Right. Okie doke. Thank you.
I had a question on the same topic, so Rhonda, you might want to just stay on camera. But it was just about when of the 60 people, some of them have been entered into programs and others have relocated. My first thought was they've been relocated to a town where they have housing. I'm sorry, I see your hand now, John. But they also might have just relocated to a different area and are living outdoors. So I was wondering if you could tell us what type of, how many people have been rehoused or housed, and how many people just gathered their belongings and moved away.
Sure. So I don't have the full count of all that, but what I can tell you is it's been a several months endeavor that's engaged a number of community-based organizations and jurisdictions, including Caltrans, property owners, CHP, the police department, and the county. So a number of our partners are involved, and also the fire district. So the outreach staff, the outreach was intensified over the past 6 months, and it included a couple of coordinated debris cleanups that the outreach staff worked very closely with the folks living out there to kind of incentivize them to move trash into these certain piles. And then Caltrans came through and picked up the garbage. So all of this was going on, and they were working on relationship building, and through that process trying to get folks who were homeless to agree to be assessed so that they could then be referred for services. So through that process, some folks left of their own accord. Some folks refused to be assessed, and some folks got into housing. And some folks moved away. Some folks were incarcerated. So a number of different outcomes occurred. Also, what happens each year when the winter comes and the inclement weather, there's just some natural attrition from the site. Some folks just seek other places to stay. So as Mike discussed, there were about 6 people. We started with about 60 people out there, and over the course of the outreach, narrowed that down to 6. And of those 6, 3 were willing to agree to be assessed and were interested in some form of housing or shelter. Housing and shelter referrals do take some time, but there's once somebody does agree to be assessed, they can get into the intensive case management where those services can be hopefully expedited to assist them. So,
Thank you. John, I see your hand, and then Nevada, and then Kurt.
Thanks. Could we go back to the chart that showed our progress against the plan and the goals that we have yet to meet? And I guess I have 2 questions. One is, what is the penalty if we miss those remaining units? Does the state fine the city? Is there any penalty, I guess?
That is a great question, Commissioner Pimentel. One moment here. And maybe I'll ask Chris. I don't know if you have an answer, or Rhonda, that might be a little bit better than mine. And sorry, I'm having some screen issues.
Sure. So I can take that one. So there currently is not a penalty for not performing. But however, the state has created incentives to try to get communities to produce these numbers. There are some things like Mike talked about, a few of the grant programs that came out this year, access to funding. So the SB2 grant and the LEAP grant yielded the city about $310,000 combined. If we were not performing on our RHNA numbers, and submitting our reports and complying with the requirements, we would not have had access to those funds. So, and I think each city is going to be taking a closer look at, they're trying to look at putting some more mechanisms in place to enforce it. But right now there is not an enforcement mechanism.
So the state hasn't created any sticks, but they will take away our carrots.
That's the current situation. Yes.
Can I jump in to ask, what about SB 35, Rhonda? Isn't that sort of combination? Depending on how you look at it, it's either carrot or stick.
Right. So it is intended to be a stick. And for us, since Menlo Park is performing and producing its numbers, we are not subject to SB 35. So for us, it worked out well.
Yeah, but I think that's part of the answer to John's question, which is, if we were not performing, we would be subject to SB 35, which gives certain developments of housing by right. Then now I'm just going to say ... because I don't know the details.
Well, I guess that's what I was trying to get at. Are we performing or are we not performing? It looks like we're doing great on above moderate, but we're pretty far behind on the very low, low, and moderate, or at least the very low and low.
Mm-hmm.
And so, well, all 3. So do we have any projects in the pipeline that we think will hit those 3 categories over the next 3 years, 2 years? And or do we not have any visibility into a pipeline as to whether or not we're going to meet those RHNA goals?
I can jump in there. Thank you, Commissioner Pimentel. And I may ask Chris to jump on as well, just in regards to what's in the pipeline. In the staff report, I didn't necessarily include it in the presentation, but wanted to mention there's a number of projects that I believe have SB 330 streamlining, which is another state law, which will move things pretty quickly. I can pull that up. Sorry, I thought I had it up. But there are some numbers in the staff report related to those projects, which will help us catch up on those. I don't know, maybe Chris, I'll let you jump in if you have a timeline on any of those types of projects, but we do have quite a few projects that are in the pipeline. And Chris, I'll hand it off to you. Maybe you can elaborate on the pipeline a little bit. Thank you.
Yeah, so we do have, so I'm Chris Turner, Assistant Planner. We do have quite a few projects that are in the pipeline in various stages of, in mostly environmental review at this point, but that's part of the overall review of the projects. We do have, I believe it's 111 Independence is, I want to say about 140 units. And obviously that's will be required to comply with the city's BMR ordinance and provide the applicable percentage of BMR units for the project. We have Menlo Uptown, Menlo Portal, a Sobrato project. So there are several projects in the pipeline. The thing to remember is that the APR takes into account the building permit issued. So the projects could potentially get entitled, but they wouldn't be counted in this report until they receive their building permits, which with some of those larger projects can take a little bit of time to get issued. But there are several projects. They are at least Portal, Uptown, and the Sobrato projects are subject to SB 330, so they could potentially have a little bit of a shorter timeline of being approved because they're limited to 5 public hearings before they need to be acted upon.
Chris, may I just ask, and I don't want to create any work, but it might be informative to the commission and to the city council and the planning commission if we were to try and throw a loop around the projects Chris just mentioned and any others that are in the pipeline and add a column to this that says stuff that's coming. And then we know, hey, we need to encourage some more affordable development, or hey, we're going to be okay through 2023. My last question or point is, do we do anything as a planning department to signal or communicate to developers? All affordable housing is great, but we really don't need much more above moderate. Could you please focus on the 3 categories where we're short? How do we, to the point made previously in communicating to developers, how do we tell them what we need, or do they already know that?
I think they already know that. As far as planning is concerned, we can only require the number of units that's required from the BMR ordinance and the BMR program. We always push for more BMR units. I know there has been some discussion of whether or not going above and beyond the number of BMR units required for the BMR ordinance would count as a community amenity or potential like a community amenity that would make the project be eligible for bonus level development. I don't know if that has come to fruition yet. I know it's in the talks. I may not be the best person to answer that question. But as far as what we can and can't require, it is the proportions in the BMR ordinance.
Thank you very much.
Nirati, I think you were next.
Thank you. And thanks, Commissioner Pimentel. You got to jump on some of my questions. So Mike, I'm just wondering, Menlo Park has just trying to put this information into context. So Menlo Park has had a jobs housing imbalance forever. With this kind of stepped up housing activity, have we made that overall situation better? Or have we continued to add jobs such that we're equal? Or are we kind of in reality, are we worse? Do you have a sense of how we're doing on that?
Good question. I think there's a lot of answers that could probably be formulated for that, because it is a quite complex question, but I do appreciate the question nonetheless. So I know there's a number of commercial development projects that are also in the pipeline, which would indicate that there will be an increase of jobs being added to Menlo Park. However, due to the pandemic, I don't know. I don't have a direct answer on how that'll look and it would probably take a deeper dive to give you the best possible answer on that, or some deeper analysis. I
Well,
don't mean to
yeah, that's perfect. I mean, I think that's just something that as it goes forth to the Planning Commission and City Council, it would be good for us as a commission to have a sense of how we're doing kind of globally. This is a cool report card tool. I like that it tracks on building permit, because it's a real, nobody pulls a permit unless they're going to build a unit. So it's a great time to do it. But, I am always wondering, when we see BMR agreements for things that are all commercial space or all office space, how does it track? Because the RENA happens cyclically and it's predictive. And it only is really capturing this housing slice. It's not really comparing against other things, other factors that are potentially exacerbating whatever the original inputs were that created these goals. We'll have a chance to reevaluate that very quickly in the next 18 months. But I think some framing from you as to what's really the heart of the matter here. Menlo Park didn't really build housing for a really long time, so we're in a deep hole, and it seems that we may be in creating a hole a little bit. We may be digging a little bit deeper, or maybe we're stabilizing a little bit, or even trending upwards, but that would be really helpful to get a handle on. The other questions, or maybe it's just comments I have, is really in looking at these report cards for many cities in the region, it's pretty common to see above moderate and exceeded, but I think the amount by which we exceed is not that common. The amount by which Menlo Park exceeds on the above moderate category is noteworthy, because it's a huge, more than 5x what was predicted there. And so with every additional above moderate housing unit, we actually produce additional impacts for affordable housing. So there are plenty of studies that are out there tying that above moderate household to needing services that are typically provided by people who are in the moderate, low, or very low category. So I just think I'm just foreshadowing as to questions that I think are going to be important for us to grapple with in the upcoming housing element cycle. And Chair Grove, I'm not sure if somebody is planning to accompany this report to its next stop at the Planning Commission, but if we as a commission decide to send a representative forward, it might be helpful to build that relationship with the Planning Commission and start to get some subject matter consensus on what it is that we have to do for the 2023 RENA cycle.
That sounds like a very good idea. Is that, I would love, Rhonda and Mike, is it okay for us to discuss that and sort of nominate somebody to speak for us and outline some talking points?
I believe that is an okay use of your time. So I think you are allowed to send a representative if it's by consensus or from the commission.
I mean, I don't want to go off what was the published agenda, but I think I'm asking if this falls within this agenda item.
It's something that's customary, that's been done before.
Okay, I think we're probably a little ahead of ourselves though, because we haven't had public comment yet. So
sure. I guess I just have one more comment, and it's for or comment slash question. I noticed in the governor's budget, there's a new enforcement unit at HCD relative to zoning, but I think it also has a tie-in to housing element. So that's going to be something that's interesting to watch. And then for Commissioner Pimentel, it seems as though state funding related to transportation is increasingly being lined up with whether or not you're meeting your housing goals. And that is something that most jurisdictions care about, is transportation funding. So it's going to be also interesting to see now that the Association of Bay Area Government is within the MTC umbrella, like how all this forward planning is going to tie together in terms of resources. So if staff, when we talk about this again, can help us connect the dots on that, that'd just be really helpful, since it seems as though that's the direction it's going. Thank you.
Kurt.
Yeah, just one other question about the homeless outreach for staff. I was wondering, there was a lot of discussion in the press about at the beginning of the lockdown about a lot of the homeless being offered spots in motels that were otherwise not getting use. And I had heard that had, come to pass, and that it was helping a lot of homeless folks. I was just wondering, whether or not that transpired in Menlo Park or not.
Commissioner Conroy, are you asking about Project Roomkey?
Perhaps I am. I didn't know it had a name. Rhonda, any information on that?
Sure, Commissioner Conroy, I can address that. So yes, that was rolled out in San Mateo County, countywide, which included Menlo Park. So the outreach services that were provided were offered to everyone who was homeless. There were certain criteria for folks to access some of the hotels that served as shelters during the earlier months of COVID. That is now transitioned over to where, what you've probably heard a lot about in the news, where the county received some state funding to purchase hotels to create permanent and transitional housing. So that is currently underway.
So were there any purchased in Menlo Park?
I'm sorry.
Were there any units that have been purchased in Menlo Park?
With the hotel program, purchase program, no, there were no hotels. To my understanding, there was 1 or 2 hotels purchased in Half Moon Bay. There was one purchased in Redwood City, in the Redwood Shores area. There was also another one purchased in Redwood City on El Camino. So those are the ones closer to us that I'm aware of. There may be more in other cities.
Great. That the Haven House on Van Buren that Life Moves has was once a motel, and it's a great strategy.
Hey, any other clarifying questions? If not, we will go to public comment. Yeah, so Mike, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For members of the public who are in attendance and wish to provide public comment, please engage the raised hand feature now. I will then have the ability to open your microphone and you will be able to address the Housing Commission. And I do not see any public comment or any hands raised at this time. So I will return the meeting to the chair. Thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, so now I would propose that we discuss, how we want to show up with the plan at the Planning Commission when they review the annual performance APR report. What comments would we like to make? I think we've had some really good comments in our questions. Go ahead, Wendy, you can kick us off.
Yeah, one thing if you read through this report, I just picked this up. I've been looking for it. I read it earlier. And I know we have a long way to go, but interestingly enough, Menlo Park was evidently only one of 28 jurisdictions in the whole state that met its very low and low income ranges for RHNA. I thought that was pretty interesting. So, I mean, it's a systemic problem throughout the state. It's a tough bill to fill, but I thought that was pretty good. We're halfway, we're in the middle sort of out of the 58 jurisdictions.
If I may, through the chair.
Yeah, go ahead.
Wanted to mention in the staff report, it does mention 28. There was a little miscalculation on staffs. So there was actually 30 total, 25 cities and 5 county jurisdictions. So a total of 30. So apologies for that. And we'll make the correction before going to Planning Commission, but just wanted to state that for the record.
Okay. So I think the questions that have been raised have been about, are we on track to staying in that high performing group, or did we just like front load all of our high performance? Go ahead, Lauren.
So I guess part of what I think our job here to do, and with the Planning Commission as these go forward to council, is to kind of construct a narrative about these data points. So I'm interested in knowing, I guess, how much are we trying to highlight staff's work or editorialize based on what we're seeing and greater themes in the region? How are we trying to direct this work? That's my question, I guess.
Well, I think from what I'm getting from Nevada and John, is sort of a forward-looking and bigger picture look. Like, yes, it's great that we're among the 30 jurisdictions who are on track, but like I just said, are we likely to stay on track? And what's already counted and what's not yet counted that's likely to be counted, and if you were to predict where we're going to end this cycle, what do you see coming down? And then in the bigger picture, to Nevada's question, our allocation, I remember it being when I first joined the commission and I read the housing element and I read the analysis of the jobs housing imbalance, and then I saw our county numbers. I was like, I'm really confused by this, because the gap is way larger than our allocation, and at the county level and even more drastically in the Menlo Park level. So to Nevada's point, we might be getting an A, but still falling farther behind what we really need to be learning or achieving, because we're adding jobs at a higher rate than we're adding housing. So I think that's like to me, that's the framework for the narrative. We can present our recommendation that they approve the report with that framing so that it's clear what the report kind of means.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Rachel has her hands up, and then I'll go to you, Wendy. Okay, Rachel.
I was actually just going to tie together what both Commissioner Pimentel and Merriman were saying, which is that yes, it looks like we're doing, we're exceeding in one category, potentially falling behind in others, and then also looking to the pipeline projects where we're going to net the affordable units is going to be through the inclusionary program, which means you're going to get a lot of market rate units. And then in each of those large projects, you're going to get some affordable units. And that's probably how we're, going to hit these numbers. So we should expect there to be a significant increase still in those market rate numbers, which has its own consequences. And it also, shows us that, or at least it says to me that, another way to address this would be to have a 100% affordable project, which would certainly accomplish a lot more numbers, which I know Commissioner Pimentel also hinted at. But just in terms of narrative and thinking about what is in the pipeline, that seems to be the most likely scenario, that there's going to be this very large proportion market rate units with a small number of affordable units. And we might get there and we might not in all the other categories.
Well, I guess I would throw out that I don't have a crystal ball, but that it looks like we are probably going to get pretty close on the two lowest categories, and that we already know that we've exceeded and above moderate because we're massively overproducing there. And then moderate is going to be pretty pitiful. And that actually is a story that's pretty familiar across multiple cities that are like Menlo Parks, where the low income kind of gets barely met, above moderate overproduced, and the moderate is probably unlikely to get built right now because we had a huge, Kurt and Wendy will tell us about the 25% drop in rents, and that's the category that becomes infeasible first. So that's my crystal ball on that.
Can I just add
a lot of
really quickly? Nevada, I just want to mention that we've talked a lot about the concerns regarding homelessness, and we spend a lot of time and energy on that. And I just don't want us to lose sight that evictions are the greatest risk factor for putting people in homelessness, and a lot of times that's because they can't. I mean, this is several dots away, but
well, the lack of the extremely low income housing units being produced is directly tied to people not having anywhere else to go. So
right.
I think that's a really good point. But maybe Lauren, you can keep us going on the idea of constructing our narrative, because I think it is a production-based narrative that I hope our commission can really get some consensus around, and lift up a couple themes that really just set the stage for what the work's going to be when the next housing element cycle comes up, which is we are doing okay based on what the metrics were last time, and it suggests, why we have a number that's so hard to hit, that's going to be hard to hit next time. 3,000 is a massive jump from 655. And what are some of the themes that we notice about Menlo Park that are going to need to be considered?
I would like
Wendy.
Oh, yes.
Oh, sorry. Wendy had wanted to say something, and well, no, not anymore. It passed. Okay.
I just wanted to say that so I think it's important that we highlight that linkage between lower production of low income units, evictions, and homelessness. Tie those together for people. I think a lot of the goals that we mentioned in our work plan probably speak to a lot of the things that we're trying to highlight as well, with potentially transit-oriented development that could net, some affordable housing, which could boost our numbers. That's something to consider. And also, we have seen that COVID-19, homelessness is a huge public health risk for COVID-19, and that seems like something we want to lift up as well. So it seems like a very, very important thing to keep people out of homelessness, because that is exponentially less costly than trying to help people out of homelessness. And I think Rhonda spoke to the notion that is a lengthy process to try and get people rehoused and reincorporated into society at large. So just some thoughts on what we want to bring forward.
And I'll just jump in and say, I added, as I was taking notes on what you're saying, Lauren, overcrowding in the context of COVID risk. Huge contributor to the disparities that we're seeing.
Particularly in our lower income households who have been so heavily hit by being essential workers and having to show up and then live together while they're serving us. It's
Yeah.
a tough thing.
And the county now has COVID data by census tract. And if you just look at cities, which is the default view, it looks like Menlo Park's doing pretty well. And then you look at East Palo Alto and they're doing very, very badly. If you look at it by census tract, you see that Bellhaven is the same color as East Palo Alto, and the rest of Menlo Park is doing extremely well. There's one other pocket that must have a congregate living facility that had a dark color, but is cleared up in the last 30 days. So we have our own very, very localized disparities. To me, it's very surprising, not surprising, but it's so easy to not see overcrowding because it's all indoors and it's private, but it's clearly in our city. So I'll just summarize what I jotted down. And I added one more thing, which is I think we should highlight the good work that's been done on homelessness. It's a real shift in the approach to homelessness in Menlo Park. And I want to thank Rhonda. I think she's a big part of that. I'm sure it takes a whole team, but Menlo Park is now engaged with a whole team. We're not asking our police officers to handle this all on their own. So I think that's that's something we should lift up. And then I agree with the linkage between the lower production of low income and very low and extremely low units to evictions to homelessness. I didn't quite capture what you're saying about, but I think you were referring to an opportunity for transit-oriented development with dedicated footprint for affordable housing, that can bring down the tax credits because it's a majority affordable housing. Is that what you were referring to, Lauren?
We mentioned in our work plan goals that we wanted to work on transit-oriented development. And I think that there's a possibility for kind of the nexus between transit-oriented development and 100% affordable property, which could help us meet those very low, extremely low numbers.
Right.
So I think that Nevada's point about finding the places where we can all agree with the Planning Commission and bringing forward things to City Council that we think are important is a great plan.
I feel like there's something else that I'm missing. One thing, this may be a bad thing for the chair to do because I might be a little bit off topic, but I keep thinking about CalCHA, which came to us before, John, you were on the commission, but it was like an agency bond program that gets really favorable financing to acquire, like, say, 7-year-old to 10-year-old market rate multifamily developments for moderate income affordability. So somebody more technical can correct my description of it, but it seemed like the only actual good idea for getting moderate rate housing that I've heard. And we put some things in place so that CalCHA could bid on a project, and they did, but they didn't get it. So I'm just wondering if they're still active, and if we have to do anything to encourage progress in that strategy, or anyway, I'd love an update on that, but we can get to the update part later. So apologies for breaking protocol of the meeting I'm running. Anything else that we want to highlight in our report to the Planning Commission? and perhaps also to the city council. Actually, I'm not sure. I think I remember giving this to the city council, not the, Mike, where are we recommending this to? I think it's city council, not planning commission.
That's correct, Madam Chair. So your recommendation will be shared with the Planning Commission. However, we will be, the reason for both commissions is to provide potential input on the report, which will be shared with the City Council. Just as a matter of timing, Housing Commission meeting in March typically is before the first Planning Commission meeting. So just are lucky to go first, and then we will include your comments just to inform the Planning Commission. And
okay.
Of course, you're welcome to send a representative. If I may, Madam Chair, I just wanted to, in regards to Commissioner Merriman's question earlier, just in regards to the jobs, housing, and balance. I did a little, I'm not an expert in regards to the methodology for the RHNA, for the Regional Housing Needs Allocation, but I know I did look on the ABAG website, which is the Association of Bay Area Governments, and they do look at the jobs, housing numbers for the region. So for all of the Bay Area, for San Mateo County, and this was pre-pandemic, it looked like San Mateo County had a total of about 10% of Bay Area jobs. So this is coming from their website on the methodology, but that's just in general. So that's where our 47,688 for San Mateo County, that's what, based on, it comes out to about 11%. So it does look like, I don't know the ins and outs of all of the methodology, but it is something that is being assessed and part of their goals for when they decide on these numbers. So for the Bay Area as a whole, in the 9 Bay Area counties, there's a grand total of 441,000 units that'll be added. So San Mateo County's portion is the 47,000 number. So just wanted to provide that as a point of clarification.
That's interesting, Mike. I think maybe I can grab you offline for so we can benchmark what Menlo Park has been, and then what it looks like where we're at before we enter this next cycle, just so we have those numbers fresh and can understand the dynamic. Thanks.
Kurt, are you raising your hand?
Yeah.
Okay. And then Wendy.
I just thought that perhaps it might be added in the minutes that I had a conversation with the folks at CoStar, and they pointed out that the vacancy rate in Menlo Park as of last month was 13.8%, which is up from 7% a year ago. And so in terms of what we can expect coming down the pike for market rate or otherwise applications, unless it bounces back quickly, and there could be a significant reduction in people applying to build more units.
Okay. Are you suggesting that be part of our narrative, or?
Well, yeah, I
just
think
contributing.
I think that the city council should be apprised of the fact that our vacancy rate's double what it was a year ago. Remote working, that number could stay high for some time. A lot of people have moved out of the Bay Area altogether, and so I'm hoping that it bounces back quickly, but it may not. As I think I mentioned in a prior meeting, and after the dot bomb in 1999, it took 12 years for rents to get back to where they were in 1999, and it could be similar, and that could obviously have a dramatic effect on people's appetite to build.
Wendy, go ahead.
Yeah, actually, I was going to say what he just said regarding the housing jobs imbalance. I think it's not quite as black and white as it used to be because of the remote working now. I just want to bring that up. I think it could play into this a little bit more. I don't know how you ever assess that, but it was easy before. You have a certain number of jobs, you have a certain amount of housing, but that may be more difficult to assess now with the remote working.
Lauren?
And I just want to point out a couple of things in response to both of your comments, which are totally on point. I think that the latest studies have shown that the mass exodus from the Bay Area is not quite as bad as everything has made it look. And that I believe there are quite a few companies now that are starting to plan a partial return to work, and that it looks like they're kind of doing a well, I don't know all the ins and outs of it because I'm not an HR professional, but it looks like there's potentially some mix of on-site and remote, or living within a certain geographic area that people are still trying to make happen. So I hear you on the fears that development might dry up, and I also want to put it out there that things may not have changed as much as we thought they would have. I see you, Rachel.
Go ahead, Rachel.
And maybe just to tie this back to our narrative, I was going to mention this earlier, but you know, there's always a fine line about when to talk about projects that are in the pipeline, because development has so much risk involved, and there's really a lot of uncertainty, especially for projects that haven't reached that entitlement stage yet, or even those that have. But that's, I mean, I guess why, you know, HCD doesn't really ask about those, but also why staff are probably hesitant to note those in detail, because they're always subject to change. So taking into account what Commissioners Conroy and McPherson said as well, though, it could maybe even if development doesn't dry up, it could change the composition of some of these projects, or you know, it could make it more difficult for the feasibility of these projects, and that's also something to keep in mind. So even if we're doing really well right now, we do need to think about you know, some challenges that lie.
Yeah. That's a very helpful way to tie this conversation to the report. Thank you, Rachel. Go ahead, Nevada.
It seems like we've had a really good conversation on this, and it would be great to find somebody to represent us, even if it is an unlikely candidate. I think any of us could tell this story.
I'll start by asking for a volunteer, and then we can volunteer people. And ask people.
Sure. I'm
Yay!
happy to do it.
Yay!
If people are comfortable with that.
I think as the architect of our narrative, you are a great candidate, and you were who I was going to volunteer. So that's great. And I would love it if you have time to go to Planning Commission and City Council. Just like Nevada said, it's an opportunity to sort of have more communication through these awkward channels, but still to have some communication between the Housing and the Planning Commissions. Yay, awesome. Okay. So we need, is there any, does anybody want to say, should I go over my notes again for a talking point, and then we can vote on our, I guess the motion might be to approve the report and the outline of comments that we wish to make at the upcoming Planning and City Council meeting. Does that sound like appropriate motion to ask for?
So moved.
All right. I need a second.
Second.
All right. Okay. So anyone object? Anyone abstain? Then it passes unanimously. And I will send you my notes, Lauren. Okay, so item D4. Yay, recommendation for the Housing Commission to recommend $4.8 million from the below market rate housing fund to 2 notice of funding availability 2020 applicants to support affordable housing activities. So Deputy Community Development Director Rhonda Kaufman will introduce item D4. Oh, I see your finger up, Nevada.
Yeah, I'm gonna recuse myself from this discussion.
Okay.
So I'll
That's
just say goodbye for
very
a few
sensible.
moments. Thanks.
Okay.
I was actually going to ask if we wanted to take a break before we dove into this next item or pushed through. What are people feeling?
I would be okay to at least do the first one first. It's 8 o'clock, and that would, but I agree we're probably going to need a break. But maybe we can do the first. Yes, I got a yes from Lauren. Everybody else okay? Okay. All right, so Rhonda.
Just if you give me one moment here, I'm going to pull up my presentation. All right. Okay, are you able to see that okay? Okay.
Yes.
Great, great. So this is my presentation is on the 2020 NOFA proposals. And just to refresh, the NOFA is a notice of funding availability. And it was published. We published a notice in November of 2020 for the availability of BMR or below market rate housing funds. The notice stated that there was approximately $10 million available. And this NOFA, there were a couple of amendments from prior NOFAs. This NOFA not only encouraged housing production and preservation activities, but also expanded to include the allowance of program applications to be submitted for programs that might produce or preserve affordable housing. And then also provided the opportunity to make any funds not awarded and remaining available over the counter. And when we say over the counter, it doesn't mean that they just get them over the counter. It means that if all the funds don't get awarded that are available through this process, and there were funds remaining on the table, that a application could be submitted at any time during the year for the Housing Commission consideration, and then move forward in the process for funding recommendation. So just a little clarification about that. And then just an overview of the use of funds. Eligible activities include activities that produce or preserve affordable housing. And typically those are construction of new housing, which are permanent rental or ownership housing, acquisition of existing housing for conversion to affordable housing, and sometimes if it's older housing, it's acquisition and rehab, rehabbing the property before it's available for rent. And then finally, preservation of existing housing. So that's more related to programs. There's also, the NOFA outlined a set of criteria that was required for applicants to meet, things like developer capacity, experience, the citing of different projects, the use of funds, so a lot of criteria. So this year, there were 3 proposals that came in. One was from HIP Housing Development Corporation, and that was a preservation activity. They were proposing to purchase a 14-unit apartment building that was for sale, and they're going to convert it to be deed restricted rental housing. That property is located at 6 to 8 Coleman Street, and they requested $5.5 million. So what's unique about that proposal is that as soon as the NOFA was released in November of 2020, HIP Housing started looking for potential projects that might meet the criteria to submit a proposal to request funds. they found a great property, a 14-unit building that was on the market, and they conducted their due diligence, determined that it was in excellent shape, and there were also vacancies currently within the building. So they, which is a rare opportunity that they encountered, so they entered into contract right away to secure that opportunity. As a result, that one needed to move forward quickly for recommendation of funding. So that one went to council on February 23rd outside of the Housing Commission process. And that staff report is available with all the details on the Housing Commission and also in your staff report for this evening's presentation. So that the good news is council approved the award of $5.5 million for that project. And we're working with HIP Housing to put together the regulatory agreement and promissory note to help them close escrow by the end of March and take possession of that property. And then moving on to the two other projects that will be before you tonight for presentation. The next one would be Habitat for Humanity Greater San Francisco is proposing a preservation activity for homeowner rehabilitation. They are proposing to rehab existing housing owned by lower income seniors and families in the Bellhaven neighborhood. And they're requesting $1.2 million. And also we've received a proposal from MidPenn proposing new construction of BMR ownership housing. They're proposing, they currently own a site at 335 Pierce Road. They're proposing to redevelop that site and going from, I believe, 4 units to 12 units of BMR ownership housing. And they're also proposing to partner with a community land trust in that project. And they're requesting $3.6 million. So overall, the total proposals came in to $10.3 million, about $300,000 above the approximate $10 million that was available. So from there, I want to just kind of walk you through the BMR Housing Fund. And this was also included in your staff report, but just want to review this. So the available fund balance, it talks about 21 million was available last year. About 9.3 million was awarded to the Gateway project, MidPenn's Gateway project on Willow Road. So those funds are not available. And then 635,000 was awarded to MidPenn's Willow Road property where they're doing a rehab to preserve the affordable housing there. Then we also had some assets, some different fees were received by the city to increase the fund balance. And then we moved to, we made available $10 million of the fund balance through the NOFA. And then the next line is a proposal to add 300,000 to that through the NOFA to be able to allow all the proposals to be funded fully if that's what the Housing Commission would like to recommend. So as you can see, the estimated ending balance, even if all the funds were recommended, all the proposals to be fully funded, there still would be a balance of about 6.9 million in our BMR fund. So there are adequate funds in this if you wish to do that. So with that, I will now ask for the applicants to come up one at a time to provide their presentations. We'll start with Habitat for Humanity, and just a bit of an overview of how the presentation will work is once they provide their presentation, there will be an opportunity for clarifying questions from the Housing Commission, and then we would move to public comment, and then it would be turned back over to the Housing Commission for your discussion. So after we go through Habitat for Humanity, we would move to MidPenn Housing. And then following that, I will put the recommendations, I'll pull those up on my presentation, and then there can be more discussion on that. So with that, I'd like to call Habitat for Humanity up to start their presentation.
All right, shall we just go ahead and jump in?
Yes, I took a deep breath to consider asking if we should take our 5-minute break now, because now I'm just recognizing that we're going to have 2 presentations and then questions. So I'm sort of back with Lauren that maybe we should take a 5-minute. Yes, I got a thumbs up. I just needed one. Okay, so sorry to get you
No,
on stage
perfect.
and then
We'll see you in
cut you
5.
off. But yeah, we'll be back at 8:15.
Perfect.
Okay.
Mike, were you able to see the full screen?
We were, so that looked good. Thank you.
Great.
Welcome back. I'll wait till I see more faces.
Mike, confirming again that you can see the screen.
We can, thank you.
Okay. I don't see Rhonda or Lauren yet. Sorry, or John. Let's give him another minute. Just checking, John and Lauren. I don't see your faces. I'm guessing since I'm not hearing you go off mute, you're not there yet. 'Rhonda and Mike, you're off camera, but are you with us?
Yes.
Mike, okay. Should we wait another minute? Should we probably should, right?
I would give it another minute.
Okay.
These are great presentations. We don't want them to miss them.
Exactly. And there's Lauren. Five minutes can seem very short.
I ran downstairs to go grab pizza and came back.
Good. We want your brain to be well energized. Okay, just to not keep people in suspense, I'm going to give John 2 more minutes, and at 8:20 we will begin. It doubles our 5 minutes, but I think it's worth waiting a little more. And there he is. All right. Okay. We can begin.
All right. You want me to take it away?
Yes, please take it away.
All right. Thank you so much. Good evening, commissioners, staff. I'm Maureen Sedonen. I'm the CEO of Habitat for Humanity Greater San Francisco. It's so great to be here with you tonight to talk about our project. I'm also joined by my colleagues, our Chief Program Officer, Matt Rosen, and our Chief Financial Officer, Jen Wilds. First, I want to just start by saying how incredibly inspired I am just to hear you all talking about your RHNA numbers and your goals and your commitments and the way you want to think about affordable housing, the level of analysis that you're doing. It just makes my heart sing because we are the great blessing to work with lots of jurisdictions and we don't always hear these things. So I just want to say that to start off. And that's not to butter you up. It's just because it's true. All right. So I want to thank you for your commitment to both building and preserving affordable home ownership. As you know, this is core to Habitat's mission. Most people think about Habitat as creating affordable home ownership opportunities across San Mateo, San Francisco, and Marin counties. Our affiliate has been doing this for the last 30 years. We've built 248 homes to date, and we have 32 homes currently under construction right now in Redwood City and Daly City. And we're very excited to say that we have almost 200 in our pipeline across our region. So we would love to also have you remember that we want to build more homes. So tonight we're here to talk about preservation, but we would love to be building more homes in Menlo Park. So call me. Rhonda's been amazing, by the way. Our home ownership preservation program focuses on vulnerable populations and neighborhoods and communities with a concentration of low-income households, primarily young people of color, seniors whose financial circumstances and deferred maintenance place them in both physical danger and a risk of displacement from their homes. In the last 10 years, we've completed 204 repairs with 184 repairs in the Bayview, East Palo Alto, and then starting in 2018 in Menlo Park's Bellhaven neighborhood. HGSF began its work in Menlo Park at the invitation of community leaders who saw the major repair work we were doing in EPA and invited and encouraged us to help address the needs of low-income homeowners in their community. We learned from them through doing our direct experience with residents that there's a significant population of vulnerable homeowners in Bellhaven, particularly those in the African-American community, whose home repair needs place them at great risk. The hot housing market, as you know, is not letting up, and we see the intense pressure that these homeowners are dealing with. In communities like Bellhaven, one of the few places in the region where sizable numbers of low-income communities of color own their homes, homeowners are facing extremely difficult choices to continue living in unhealthy and poorly insulated homes, which have structural problems, leaking roofs, and other dangers, or be forced to sell their homes and leave the region. They tell us they want to stay, and we know their ability to stay in their homes is critical to the well-being and the sustainability of their families. Our homeownership repair program addresses these specific challenges by helping homeowners make the critical repairs that keep them in their homes, prevent them from being displaced, and help ensure that we help preserve the social fabric of the community of longtime homeowners in which they and the essential role that they play. With our focus on preservation and community stability in Bellhaven, our proposed project strongly aligns with the NOFA's focus on preservation of affordable housing and the improvement of blighted neighborhoods. Our plan also reflects a stated goal in Menlo Park's housing element to rehabilitate viable older homes, preserve existing stock, and maintain the stability of residential neighborhoods. So this partnership is really critical between the community, Habitat, and the homeowners. I'm going to turn it over to Matt. Matt, you're muted.
Hi, all. The focus of our repairs will be major items that put homeowners at risk of displacement and tackle issues that put their health and their safety at risk. Our experience is that homes have a variety of issues that need attention, especially those on the skin of the building, like roofs and windows that keep homeowners safe, warm, or cool, and dry. And while each project, each rehab that we'll do is unique, we anticipate that they'll be in the range of $40,000 to $75,000, which, based on our experience, is usually necessary to complete jobs with several elements, including a roof replacement. Just to be clear, this program is not for home upgrades like bathroom or kitchen remodels. I just wanted to show you as an example a window replacement, which is a primary item that we would focus on. Here's an example of where we made a necessary replacement of a dilapidated single pane window and replaced it with a double pane window. We do lots of these kinds of jobs, and often in association with roofs, windows, and other major items in a home. Our goals are to complete 20 rehabs with costs ranging between $40,000 to $75,000 over 3 years, which means that we will serve 20 households with incomes at or below 50% of area median income. We'll take on slightly fewer projects in year one to address the need for additional outreach and community engagement, with a plan to do 7 rehabs in year 2 and then 8 in year 3. Let me walk you through the schedule of activities that will follow in this rehab work. We'll start with really strong community outreach and engagement to ensure equitable awareness of this opportunity to qualified low and very low income homeowners. We'll conduct both direct outreach and partner with existing agencies that serve residents in the neighborhood. A dedicated outreach specialist will draw on existing relationships with homeowners, target specific homes, and conduct a yearly mailing using a radius poll to ensure complete coverage of the physical announcement for potential homeowners or home applicants. The outreach specialist will also engage public and private agencies that connect with homeowners, including Bellhaven Senior Center, local churches, your building division, Bellhaven Action, Grid Alternatives, SOUP, the Construction Academy at Job Train, and other organizations. So homeowners will submit an application in which they provide initial income data, describe repair and rehab needs, and confirm they own the home in the Bellhaven neighborhood. Then our staff will work closely with applicants to gather documents to verify income and program eligibility. Once we've determined eligibility, applicants will be assessed based on need, urgency, and available funding. And then our in-house repair assessor will perform a detailed home assessment to determine the scope and the budget for the rehab. Once we secure a loan agreement with the homeowner, we'll undertake the rehab activities, which include securing necessary permits. We anticipate a range of 12 to 20 weeks per project for each rehab, but it will vary based on scope, conditions, and the season. I want to conclude by saying that many longtime low-income homeowners we work with have a deep distrust of lenders and contractors, which is grounded in the legacy of racist policies like redlining, blockbusting, and other discriminatory policies and practices. With awareness about this reality, we'll use a hands-on, respect-based approach to guide homeowners through each and every step in the process in order to ensure trust and confidence in the repair, the schedule, and the loan terms. We'll also provide follow-up supports to all homeowners, including estate planning, to ensure that homeowners can remain in their homes, preserve equity, and keep the home in the family over time.
So for this program, Habitat's going to act as both the lender and the general contractor for the rehab work. Qualified applicants will be eligible for up to $75,000 of a deferred loan at a 0% interest rate, which would be secured with a deed of trust on the property and can be repaid in either 30 years or at the sale or transfer of the home, or when the home ceases to become owner occupied. So if there's a rental situation going on. Now, what we generally see is that homeowners tend to stay in their homes long after the completion of the work that we do with them. But in the event that a homeowner does sell the home at some point, all those funds can be immediately recouped and then reused for another eligible household in the program. So the way this would work is first, Habitat would pre-qualify the homeowner and draft a repair agreement stating the program rules, our intentions, giving them a loan estimate and all of the terms up front, and any other appropriate disclosures. We would then self-perform the work utilizing a combination of our Habitat staff, we have construction department, our volunteers, and any qualified subcontractors as needed. After the work is complete, then we would obtain any required inspections and then walk through with the client to make sure that they're satisfied with the work. And then in parallel, our qualified loan officers would originate the loan, which would be either serviced by Habitat internally or through our existing third-party servicer, Amerinat Community Services.
Our total project budget for 20 rehabs is $1,310,000, including just under $1 million for the labor and materials associated with the rehabs. Other costs, including permits and fees, outreach, and marketing and overhead, are just under $200,000. Habitat is seeking $1.2 million from the City of Menlo Park, with the remainder of necessary funds raised through private philanthropy, corporate sponsorships, and in-kind labor.
And before we close, I just want to lift up again our extensive experience doing this work. We've repaired dozens of homes, we've replaced dozens of roofs, and we've done amazing things to help transform the lives of our partner families. We've completed more than 200 repairs for low-income homeowners in EPA, Bellhaven, and San Francisco's Bayview Hunter Point neighborhood since 2011. We're also our mortgage lender. We have qualified loan officers on our staff with training to qualify and underwrite loans for both mortgages and home rehabs. This makes us a very unique partner for this work. And finally, I want to thank you all again for your commitment to affordable home production and preservation, and for your consideration of our program to preserve homeownership for longtime Bellhaven residents. And we are happy to answer any questions you have about our programs, our qualifications, or our intentions. We thank you again.
Oh, sorry, Rhonda, are you facilitating the transition to our next applicant, or am I?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think before we move on to the next applicant, this would be the opportunity to move forward, turn it back over to you for clarifying questions and answers, and then public comment, and then discussion before moving on to the next.
Okay, very good. That's good, because we would forget other questions. Lauren.
And I just want to say thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you for doing preservation work, which isn't tremendously popular, but is a remarkably important anti-displacement tool. So thank you for that. And two, I was curious, traditionally I'm familiar with Habitat doing having the owner work with you in the home buying process. And I noticed that there was some in-kind labor that was involved. I thought I heard, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that a significant portion of these rehabs and preservation work are going to be with seniors in the Bellhaven neighborhood. Are they going to be working with you?
Yes, Matt, do you want to take that or do you want me to take it?
Sure. We certainly are going to engage homeowners in sweat equity, which can look very different depending on the homeowner. For a senior, it might mean that they make lunch for the construction crew, which they have done a lot of for the homes that we've done. And it could be for another homeowner that their family, their children, or their extended family would help with the actual construction, with the cleanup and so forth. But there is an expectation of sweat equity. And it's also just, I think for our homeowners, it's a great experience for them and an opportunity to connect with our volunteers and our staff.
Agreed. And I think it's a point of pride too, to be able to say
Absolutely.
they did that work. But I love the flexibility that you guys have with that sweat equity and the fact that cooking could be part of it or extended family could. I think that is a really clever way to address that with a more at-risk population. So again, thank you so much for being so mindful, respectful, and responsive to this.
Thank you.
Anyone else have a question or series of questions? Okay, I do. I have a few. So one question is, perhaps extremely low income people don't ever own a home, but if there was someone who owned a home and was extremely low income, would they not qualify for this program?
They would qualify for this program. We certainly have worked with many extremely low income, and technically these are folks at 30 or below. Certainly that's possible. We're not anticipating that that's going to be a significant portion of the homeowners that we serve, but I think it's really important that we offer this to folks who are low income, very low income, and significantly in need, and have the flexibility to make sure that we do whatever it takes to keep longtime homeowners in their homes in the community.
Okay, thank you. I think that the staff report, or maybe your proposal itself, specified 30% to 50%. So that's why I asked. I'm not surprised by your answer, and I'm glad to hear it. And then a question about in cases of unclear title, which you referred to, I believe it was in your proposal. I read so many different things. What in that case, do you have sort of accessible and culturally competent service providers you can refer people to?
We'll certainly want to connect homeowners who may have that particular situation to area legal aid organizations or other providers. That is really important that they get that support so that those issues can get addressed so that we can proceed.
Okay. And then the next question I had was about code violations. There's sort of a bunch of like, it depends on how severe it is. And like, can you just illuminate that a little bit more? what, what are the possible outcomes when you see a code violation?
Well, we certainly have worked. Let me say, first of all, we often work very closely with, and we will work closely with the building department of the city of Menlo Park. They're often great partners. They're great partners for us in helping to identify homeowners that need these repairs, and to, without violating rules, regulations, and laws of a particular municipality, will want to make sure that we can address these code violations, and that if those code violations are addressable, and also, but still help us fulfill the purpose of the program, we'll want to move forward. Our experienced construction and program teams have worked very frequently with homeowners that have had code violations, and just help them address those as part of the work that we do to help complete either a major or a minor home repair project.
If somebody had a technical code violation that wasn't a health hazard, and it was not related to the work that you do, are you obliged to make sure that that gets addressed, or do you have some latitude there so that you don't have to stop a project just because somebody has, I don't know. I don't know how code violations go, but I'm sure that there are some that just really aren't that important.
So, Commissioner Grove, excuse me, I believe we do have latitude, and I'm happy to follow up with our experts who have handled this situation and get a more detailed answer for you in writing, because I do think this is at the extent of my expertise in this area. Jen or Maureen, if you had any additional information here.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I do know of a specific case where someone had a violation because of the number of vehicles that were in their property. And so we actually, pointed them to resources to help them deal with that issue and to remediate that issue alongside with sort of planning and implementing their home repair. And so I think that's where our partnership with other organizations and the city really came into play. And it was a very successful way. And we had another one where they had a lot of, a sort of a tree issue and a lot of, sort of overgrown, tree and foliage in their yard. And again, working with them, bringing out a crew of volunteers, clearing the yard. So we sort of doubled down on that project and got both of the things done at the same time.
Great, thanks. And then I had a few suggestions for additional outreach partners, which I'm happy to just follow up with you later about. And then, and that's it. That covers all my questions.
Thank you.
I do want to say though, if there was someone who had a code violation that was of such nature that the city deemed that it would be critical to deal with that first, we would keep that person on the waiting list and queue while they remediated that other issue and then move forward with them.
Okay, great. I guess I think my vague concern, which I don't really understand well, is I know that sometimes people go in with good intentions, but then because of code violations, actually, like ADUs, for example, an informal ADU could be in violation of code, and actually people have to be displaced while the code violation. So, but I think I'm a little bit mixing up issues. So,
and that is something that we're also, we're looking at that as well for a future, sort of a deeper project. So it is an issue across a lot of communities.
Yeah. Does anybody else have any questions? Kurt?
So I'm trying to understand if you have, say, a renovation that costs $50,000. I guess first question is, what would a loan look like today? What's the interest rate? What's the amortization term? The next question is, if the house gets sold, then does Menlo Park ever see any of that money, or how do we get guaranteed that it is getting put back into similar purposes?
Great question. So I'll answer the second question first. So we're really modeling this program after some of our CalHome programs that we have for the new construction homes that we build. So when we do that initial disbursement of the loan, if that money is paid back early and or when it's paid back after the 30-year deferred period, we would put it back into an earmarked loan fund for Bellhaven and just find the next homeowner, and it's called a reuse account. So we would establish a separate reuse account that would be earmarked for these funds and make sure that this stays within the program for a certain period of time. And then our loan program that we're right now proposing to you to the homeowner would be a 0% deferred loan. So the payments wouldn't be due until one of those triggers happens. So if they start to rent out the property, or if they sell or transfer the property, potentially if the property transfers to a relative through will or prorate, those are situations that we kind of go through on a case by case basis, because especially if the person who takes over the property qualifies as a qualified applicant, we might just transfer the loan to them. But for the most part, we're just waiting for that payment to either come back after the 3 years or when the transfer happens.
Okay, and this is the first NOFA funding that Habitat has asked Menlo Park, or are there previous ones before this?
For the rehab program, yes, we have some historical funding from you for new construction homes from about 20 years ago, I believe.
And so Rhonda and others track all that?
The additional funding from before was actually a different, it was a different setup. It was not like the CalHome program. It was more of a straight loan that we have been paying back over 20 years.
Okay, thanks.
And I think you asked about the interest too, and the interest is 0% to the homeowner.
And just to address your question about how do you know that it's being used in Bellhaven, our agreement that we have with CalHome, with HCD, is that they can come in every few years and monitor the account. So we have a conversation with one of their auditors who wants to see our account, wants to see all of the paperwork of all of the loans that have been dispersed through the program. So periodically, we do sit down and discuss every piece of paperwork that has been in exhaustive detail that has been done on this loan program. So that is a possibility as well.
Thank you.
I'm looking for eyebrows raised, hands raised. Any other questions? No. Okay. I guess we can go to public comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For members of the public who are in attendance and wish to provide public comment, please engage the raised hand feature. I will then have the ability to open your microphone and you can provide public comment to the Housing Commission. And I do not see any hands raised on this portion of the presentation. So I'll return it back to you, Madam Chair.
All right. So that means we're ready to discuss or entertain a motion. So let me first give us a chance to discuss if anyone has any comments. I'm very excited about this. I think it's really awesome. I have, sort of studied the history of housing segregation, and that includes the Great Migration of African Americans who came here to work in the war industries and ended up living in Bellhaven. And those are the people, that's the generation that we're talking about. So I'm really glad that we are helping them. So that's my comment. Anything else anybody wants to say? Okay, do we have a motion? Oh, wait, no. Wait, so go ahead, Wendy, you can raise your hand. I'll call on you, but I don't know if we're really ready to take a motion until, or if we're gonna wait until after the second. I see Rhonda nodding. The motion will come later. Yeah.
I think it's fine to take a motion. If the Housing Commission is ready to take a motion on this item, that would be fine. I can pull up the slide with the recommended motion. And you can take those one at a time after each presentation if you wish.
Okay. Wendy, I want to hear what you have to say
No,
before
I was ready to make the motion, so I can read off her slide.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay, the stated motion for this item, there are three motions that we are, as staff, are recommending tonight. One which can be taken later at the end of the presentations, so these can be taken out of order, will be to recommend the additional 300,000 be added to the 10 million for this NOFA. If you decide to recommend full funding. The second motion would be to recommend 1.2 million from the VMR Housing Fund to Habitat for Humanity, Greater San Francisco, to support the affordable housing preservation through rehab of existing homeowner units for this item. And then the third motion you see on the slide would be for the next presentation. In total, these two, if you do recommend these, will come to 4.8 million. But if at this time you would like to make a motion, I would suggest number 2 would be the wording.
Okay, well, I recommend approving the motion that's number 2 on the board in front of us to Habitat for Humanity.
Great. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Does anybody oppose the motion? Or nope. Does anybody want to abstain? All right, it passes unanimously. Yay. Thank you.
Thank you.
And congratulations.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. And we look forward to doing a great job for you. So thank you. Thank you, Rhonda, for your excellent work.
We really appreciate it, y'all. Have a good evening.
Yeah.
Thank you. You too.
All right. Take care. Go Mid-Penn. You're going to slay it. All right. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, so we're ready for our next presentation. Is that right, Rhonda?
Yes, correct. So
Okay.
the next presentation will be Mid-Penn Housing. They're proposing new construction of ownership housing. So it would go in a similar format, Chair Grove. Once they conduct their presentation, it'll be clarifying questions and then comment and then discussion and then a recommendation. Thank you.
Good evening, commissioners and city staff. Thank you for the opportunity to present our proposal this evening. My name's Jan Lindenthal. I'm the Chief Real Estate Development Officer at Mid-Penn Housing. And with me is Bianca Newman, who's a senior member of our development team, and Melissa Jing, who's an acquisition analyst on our team. I wanted to start by just sharing a little bit of history about how it is that Mid-Penn came to own the properties on Pierce Road. We acquired the properties in 2015. Our immediate goal was to preserve the housing, for the families that were living there. This was part of a strategy that Mid-Penn implemented countywide, and ultimately we acquired 3 properties during this time period, one in Pacifica, one in Redwood City, and this property here in Menlo Park. Our specific goal was to acquire existing multifamily properties where we could and preserve them. This was in 2015, where we were seeing escalating rents and people were being displaced. At that time, we were engaged in community outreach for the 2 properties that Mid-Penn owns on Willow Road. And we knew that there was interest from the community to learn more about Mid-Penn's intentions for the 335 Pierce property. So we held a community meeting at the Senior Center to seek feedback on Mid-Penn's properties in Bellhaven, including Pierce Road. And at that meeting, we shared some different scenarios for how Pierce Road could be redeveloped, because we acquired not just the fourplex, but a vacant lot right next door as well. And we heard clear support at that meeting for affordable homeownership. However, at that time, the city's BMR program policies didn't work well with a homeownership model because the affordability was limited to households earning no more than 60% of the area median income. So we continued to own and manage the Pierce Road apartments and focused our efforts on the reconstruction of our properties on Willow Road. So now, some 6 years later, we've redeveloped the 1200 block to Sequoia Belhaven Senior Apartments and are prepared to start construction on the redevelopment of Gateway Apartments, breaking ground in June of this year. And as all of you are aware, a change was made last year to the city's BMR program that now allows income targeting up to 80% of the area median income, which makes a homeownership project much more feasible. Our proposal for Pierce Road is to transform the 4 existing rental homes into 12 affordable townhomes. But key to this proposal is the formation of a Belhaven-led and centered community land trust that would own the underlying land on which the homes would be built. Based on the outreach that we've done over the years and conversations we've had in the community, we feel this is an essential element of our proposal, that the property be redeveloped in such a way that it can become a permanent community asset. And MidPenn is excited to help facilitate this. We see our role as the developer of the homes on the land that would be owned by a Belhaven-centered and led community land trust. We've had preliminary conversations with community leaders about this concept and believe there is support for it. A key next step for us, if the funding is awarded, would be to advance those discussions and help identify a Belhaven organization that would found this community land trust. This is a really opportune moment to take up this proposal, we believe. First of all, because we're starting construction on the apartments at on Willow Road at the Gateway Apartments, we have an opportunity to relocate the 4 families that currently live at Pierce Road into new affordable housing. Second, the city's housing element creates an opportunity for us to rezone the property to maximize the number of homes that can be built. And Bianca will speak more about that in just a moment. We also think this proposal is well aligned with important local policy documents. These documents propose that, so these documents inspired us to propose that we deploy this precious resource that we're in control of, which is the land, to meet community identified needs and expand community control. With this proposal, we recognize we're presenting something that, while far from being all figured out, would advance affordable homeownership and develop capacity in Belhaven to control its own destiny. We're deeply committed to help build this community capacity and to work in close partnership with the community to advance these priorities. And now Bianca will share more about how we will actually make this work.
Thank you, Jan. I'm really excited about this project and to share with you how it works. With the $3.6 million in NOFA funding, we will really be able to create some long-lasting community benefits, taking 4 rental homes and creating 12 affordable home ownership opportunities for low-income families in Belhaven, while standing up a Belhaven-centered community land trust, and building a replicable and scalable model that can be delivered to market quickly. The benefits of a CLT are numerous: community self-determination and control of a major community asset, the opportunity for permanent affordable home ownership. These homes will be affordable not to just the initial purchaser, but all subsequent homeowners will have the same opportunity. Community land trusts also increase the affordability to the end homeowner. That's because with community land trusts, the homeowners are really only paying property taxes on the improvements, and so they do not pay property taxes on the land. And as Jan sort of talked about a little bit, you know, in the Y plan, they really discuss CLTs as a possible tool for mitigating displacement. And there have been other studies that have shown that community land trusts really remove market speculation, curb gentrification, and keep communities in place. Home ownership itself is a huge benefit. It's the single greatest means of wealth building and economic mobility in this country. And we really see this project as the missing rung or the bridge, that missing piece between rental housing and market rate home ownership. These homeowners will benefit from fixed housing costs, so there aren't increased rents annually, and having that sort of stability and really increases your ability to save and plan for the future. These individuals will also be paying off principal over time. And so if you just look at the first 7 years of home ownership, these individuals will pay down $65,000 in principal in a 7-year period. Additionally, we're at the site, we're looking at a controlled equity model, and that's a model which allows the individual homeowners to share in the gain in value of the property while keeping the home affordable. So if we were to do a fixed 2% annually, in 7 years, a homeowner would have $80,000 in equity. So that means at the end of a 7-year period, with principal and controlled equity return, a homeowner of one of these homes could have $145,000 available to them. And that's real wealth. That opens up a lot of options and opportunities, including maybe deciding to move on and purchase in the open market, a market rate home, opening up the opportunity for another affordable homeowner. Additionally, these individuals benefit from the mortgage interest tax deduction, our country's largest housing subsidy that's only available to homeowners. So, you know, that coupled with the CLT and the stewardship of home ownership, we think this is a really wonderful opportunity for the Belhaven community. As Jan mentioned, this is an opportune time because in order to get to the 12 proposed units, will require rezoning. The fourplex and the vacant lot collectively are 0.34 acres. And as currently zoned, we actually couldn't even rebuild the fourplex as it exists. And if we were to stay under current zoning and then overlay a density bonus, we could support 8 homes on the site. However, what we're recommending is pursuing R4S with an affordable housing overlay. This really stays within the character and context of the surrounding homes while allowing us to achieve the 12 homes that we would like to create on the site. So if the project's funded, the next steps would be to spend the remainder of the year really laying the groundwork for that, for the CLT, for the Community Land Trust, coordinating with the community, getting to understand the wants and needs, and then in 2022, you know, working towards the rezoning with the City of Menlo Park in coordination with their housing element process. And once the rezoning is done, in 2 years, with entitlements, we can have homes to market. So that's also one of the advantages, and what's sort of really exciting about this proposal is that it allows us to get affordable homes to market more quickly than traditional tax credit housing. And that's something that we need right now. We need more units, and we look forward to your questions, and we thank you for taking the time to hear our proposal this evening.
Well, thank you. Commissioners? Oh, I'm sorry. Have I been on mute? What I silently said is, thank you. Commissioners, do you have any questions? Kurt, go ahead.
So what are the anticipated income limits on the buyers, and what happens if their income goes up over those limits over the course of their ownership?
Bianca, can you share what the income limits are? I don't know if you have a slide, but you could just verbally share. But what we're targeting is up to a maximum of 80% of area median income. That's for the initial qualification. And one of the opportunities here, though, is that once that homeowner qualifies and moves into the home, their income could go up. And hopefully that's what that combined with the equity would help them then move up into the housing market at some point in the future. So they wouldn't have to maintain that income qualification. Their income would be able to go up over time.
Thank you.
And one of the questions I had as I was reading your proposal, but then it got answered later on in the proposal, was, is there a possibility of extending the affordability to lower incomes? And I saw that, yes, with increased funding or alternate sources, additional sources of funding, that some of the units could be made available to people who earn less than something lower, 60%, 70%, that it could be more deeply affordable, which I was very glad to see. So that was a question, answer, and comment all in one.
Well, that's one of the things that we're really excited about with this proposal, is that with the city investment that we've requested, we can get to 80% of area median income, which we think is huge. And we intend to secure, go after and secure other sources that would really provide more down payment assistance direct to the home buyers. So it would help them make up that down payment assistance, reduce the mortgage that they would need to support. So therefore, increasing the affordability.
Any other questions from commissioners? Rachel.
The rezoning process as part of the housing element makes sense because the city is opening up that possibility for every parcel potentially in the city. But it won't be completed until 2023. So are you potentially pursuing a rezoning independently of the housing element process? Would that potentially expedite this? Or is that really the timeline? Is the rezoning effort with the housing element and then pretty rapidly afterwards being able to develop the units?
That's our current plan. I would say that we would want to consult with staff, and if they had other suggestions about how we could pursue that, we would want to obviously listen to that. But we think that the advantage of including this as part of the housing element update process is it allows for there to be community conversation about it, as well as the opportunity to take advantage of that affordable housing overlay zone.
There's also the time it takes to stand up the CLT. That's part of this as well. And so it aligns, it more closely aligns with the timeline needed there.
Yeah, absolutely. I was thinking that while you were making the presentation. Thank you for pointing that out.
Any other questions? I had one more about the green building features or standards. Could you elaborate on that a little bit? Menlo Park adopted REACH codes, which is an all-electric building code, and has committed to, or has set a target of net zero emissions by 2030. So if you could, so that's a big concern. So if you could talk about that, be great.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's our standard is all electric in our rental housing. And so our goal would be that would be our intent here is to design. I'm sorry, it's been a long day.
I know.
Our intent would be to design the homes to be all electric, and then to incorporate the other kind of standard features that we include in all of our homes, which is, high insulation, quality windows, all of those things. The other point I wanted to make, though, and this goes back to the formation of the Community Land Trust, is there are a lot of trade-offs that we will want to take into consideration as we're thinking about the design of the homes and the features. And so that's where there are real benefits to certain improvements that may increase the initial cost of the home, but will lower the long-term cost for the homeowner. And by having the CLT as our partner throughout this, we can make those decisions together and really come up with a program that will meet the future homeowners' needs.
Great, thank you. Okay, last call for questions, and then we'll go to public comment.
I have a couple more questions about the Community Land Trust, but they're not really clarification questions. So maybe we can wait until after public comment.
Okay. Then let's go to public comment. Mike, can you assist us with that?
Absolutely. Thank you, Madam Chair. For members of the public who are in attendance and wish to provide public comment, please engage the raised hand feature now. I will then have the ability to open your microphone and you will be able to provide your public comment to the Housing Commission. And just give it another second. And I do not see any hands raised, so I will return the meeting to the chair. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So go ahead, Rachel. You had some questions that we're not clarifying. They're just going to cause more confusion. So go for it.
Yeah, that's right. So thinking about developing the Community Land Trust and building it from the ground up, essentially, can you talk us through, and I mean, I'm not asking for a precise timeline, of course, but can you talk us through how you envision those parallel processes? So as you've explained, the typical development process and the rezoning, and then at the same time, what kind of steps are you going to take to start to put together that Community Land Trust?
Well, the first step is to convene those community conversations to identify a Belhaven-based organization that would want to be the sponsor of the land trust, as well as leaders in the community that would want to be part of the land trust. So one of the things that we're very mindful of is that MidPenn isn't going to come into Belhaven and set up a land trust. We want to collaborate with the community to support that effort. And so we have included some funding in our request that would help to provide some resources to the community, legal resources, technical assistance in the formation of the land trust. To Bianca's point about, we can actually use the housing element update process to kind of sync up with the community land trust process because of the time it takes to secure that 501c3 tax exemption, as well as the time it takes to kind of stand up all of the governance that you would want to have for the land trust, to identify all of the board members that would want to serve so that people are trained and feel like they're ready to really step into that role. So for us, it really starts with those community conversations and that organizing work in the community to identify the institutions and the leaders that would want to be part of the formation of the land trust, and then to using the resources from our NOFA request to provide those folks the resources that they need to stand up the community land trust. And MidPenn's prepared to support that process in any way that we can, and we want to do that, but we also want to be clear that that's a process that we want to support and not drive, and not trying to impose something on the community, but really follow the community's lead and support that process.
That was a comment that I had, was that I really appreciate the way you are viewing like the benefit of a community land trust as, you know, community control of community assets. And to achieve that, it really has to be driven by and centered in community. And so everything I saw in your proposal or application, and that I hear you saying, it just sort of is all resonant with that. And I just want to say I appreciate that. And a sort of a clear, I also appreciate a recognition of the work involved. Like, this is a big deal. It's really a lot of work and leadership that goes into it. And it's comforting to me that you are sort of articulating the level of commitment that it will take and that you're dedicating resources to it. Does anybody else have comments? No? Are we ready to hear a motion?
Actually, I have one more question.
Okay.
About
I have to learn to allow for more silences. Go for it.
About the relocation of the 4 tenants in the current building. Now, this is a couple of years out, so there could be some turnover. Maybe there's a vacancy or something in the 4 units. I don't know, but since this is a couple of years out, the plan is to offer a new unit in the Gateway project to these households. And if they are not, if there is no vacancy at the time in the project, or if the timing doesn't work out, is there a backup? Would there be a backup relocation plan for those houses?
Yeah, that's a good question. And this is something that I have to express gratitude to the city staff that have worked with us to include a preference in the Gateway program that allows a preference for these 4 households. So as part of the actual lease up of the new homes at Gateway, these 4 families will have a preference. So there will be units available for them. And we think the timing of that will sync up very well, because we're starting construction this year on the Gateway apartments. Will be finished at the end of 2022, probably before the housing element is done. And then we still have to go through our entitlement process. So we think that we'll have plenty of time before we're ready to start construction on Pierce Road for the families to move into Gateway.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to allow for a few seconds of silence in case anybody has another question. Kurt has another question.
I'm just curious, in the community land trust, are there parties already identified that are stepping up for this?
Yeah, that's a good question. We've had conversations, but we don't have anyone identified yet. And I think that the commission's recommendation tonight is really going to help to put some wind behind our sails and continuing those conversations, because this will provide some really important momentum. I think that this is real, this can actually happen. And so there's a real reason to form the community land trust now. There's an asset that it can actually own and an actual project that it can help facilitate. So it's something that's much more real and not just an idea out there.
And you've set up similar partnerships in the past, and you know, I don't know, who would be some of the entities, like the Jan Zuckerberg people, or who are the people that have done this in the past?
MidPenn has not formed a community land trust in the past. We have worked with many community-based organizations to build affordable housing, primarily faith-based organizations. We've also partnered with EPA Can Do in the past. So we have a lot of experience partnering. In terms of forming a community land trust, both Bianca and myself have experience working on community land trusts prior to coming to MidPenn. So we're bringing that expertise to the table. But the types of organizations that we would be looking to partner with in Belhaven would be nonprofit organizations, civic institutions based in Belhaven, led by Belhaven residents that would be interested in this community land trust model. And we think based on the conversations that we have that interest is there, but now the next step will be to make those conversations real and take them to the next step.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. If there are no more questions or comments, then I think I'm sensing that we're close to or ready to entertain a motion.
Move.
Okay.
Second.
Move number 3, second number 3. All right. Very exciting. Does anybody oppose the motion? Does anyone want to abstain? Or why would you want to do that? Okay, it passes unanimously.
Thank you very much. Very much.
Awesome. Thank
It's
you.
really awesome step. Thank you.
All right. And now to make all of this possible, we have one more motion, right? Rhonda, I will turn it back to you.
So thank you. So the 2 recommendations have now passed. So the final recommendation that we would ask for in order to make available 4.8 million for these would be what you see as number 1 here, to recommend an additional 300,000 from BMR housing funds be allocated to the 2020 BMR NOFA, to increase the 10 million to 10.3 to fund all of the eligible projects.
Okay. Any questions? I guess just questions first, potentially public comment, and then we'll discuss and make a motion. Same process. Any questions? Okay, seeing none, let's go to public comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For members of the public who are in attendance and wish to provide public comment, please engage the raised hand feature now. I will then have the ability to open your microphone and you can provide public comment to the Housing Commission. And I do see one hand raised, so give me 1 second. All right, our public comment comes from Pam Jones, and Pam, you should be able to unmute your microphone.
Yes, thank you. And yes, Pam Jones again. And I just want to say that this is, I believe, is exciting for the community, but especially for people who would not ordinarily have this opportunity. And a note about MidPenn, when they presented several years ago to the community about the purchasing of Pierce Road as well as the lot, we were talked nonstop about home ownership. And at that time, they weren't able to do it. And you know how I am. I just said, well, figure it out. You need to change the way you do things, And so this is just very powerful. And I just wanted to share with you that, yes, they have done their homework in the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. And I do not see any additional hands raised, so I will return the meeting to the chair. Thank you.
Okay. Is there any discussion on this item? Kurt?
I just want to ask staff, how many community land trusts are operational in Menlo Park or San Mateo County right now? if they happen to know.
Sure, Commissioner Conroy. I'm not sure that I'm aware of all that are operating in the county of San Mateo, but I know of a few. There's Valley Community Land Trust, who has come and made a presentation to your Housing Commission about what they do. They operate in Menlo Park, and there's also Pahali, a land trust that operates out of East Palo Alto. So those are the two primary ones locally that I'm aware of. I'm not sure if any other commissioners that also work in housing or in this field are aware of others, but that's what I know of.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other? Well, I'll just comment that I think the $300,000 is a very good idea to add to our pot so that we can fully fund both. And if we're ready, I will ask for a motion.
I move to follow staff's recommendation regarding number 1.
Great. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Kurt. Anyone want to oppose? Anyone want to abstain? Passes unanimously. Yay! All right. Hooray. Good work, everybody. Let's see, I'm scrolling through the notes. We're down to reports and announcements.
I'm gonna invite Nevada back.
What?
Oh, she came back. Did she come back? No.
Rhonda?
Sure, I on camera, but yeah, I just let her know, and there she is now.
Oh, Nevada, thank you. I think I'm tired. Welcome back, Nevada. Okay, so we're on to reports and announcements. Ad hoc subcommittee reports, which we don't have any of, I believe. Well, there's the ad hoc committee to organize the meeting we just had. So we did our thing. And commissioner updates. Do we have any commissioner updates? I have a few. Does anybody else have any? Okay, let's see if I can remember what my commissioner updates were. Darn. Yeah, here it is. Oh, Menlo Together is holding a general meeting on Sunday at 4, and the speaker is going to be from Get Healthy San Mateo County, and they're going to be talking about health equity and housing. The meeting is March 7th at 4 p.m. and the link to register can be found at menlotogether.org if anyone is interested in attending. It's an hour meeting, 30 minutes of it will be dedicated to this presentation. So that was my commissioner update, I believe.
I have an update, but I may need Rhonda's support to get it out in a coherent way. At the end of January, the governor extended the moratorium for evictions and then also made significant resources available to help with rental assistance, emergency rental assistance. I believe that the county has elected to have LISC, Local Initiative Support Coalition, act as the administrator or implementer of these funds in the county. And I'm curious, I want to make sure that people know that, because if your landlord elects to participate, you can, and you meet the income qualifications, you can, while funds are available, receive up to 80% of the rent to pay your landlord. Your landlord would have to agree to forgive 20%. But that is some significant resources, and I'm hopeful that Ms. Kaufman can help spread the word a little bit, because I think it's confusing, and I want to make sure that people in Menlo Park who need the assistance, that landlords understand the program and can weigh the pros and cons of participating, as it would get them some resources and would certainly help alleviate consumer debt, which is pretty crushing if you've lost your job due to illness or other, and really don't have a way to get out of the hole that you may be in. So. Rhonda, do you know if there's a way, the plan for the city to promote that? It's a personal concern of mine that the applications will be due in a couple of weeks, and I don't know if everybody knows about the resource that's available.
There wasn't a plan until just now. So we'll try to get up to speed on what's available and try to use our website and other outreach methods as we can to promote the information.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, a good first step might be to see if there's anybody in the southern part of the county that's agreed to be a tier 1 partner. That's one of the groups that is supposed to market the. And I'm still learning about it myself, but that's as far as I've gotten in the manual here. Thank you.
To piggyback on that and just ask a question, Rhonda, come back, please. It was just, do we have any dedicated email lists or points of connection or anything like that with landlords in the community?
Not aware of a landlord list that we keep. I can look into that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other updates from commissioners? Okay, then looking at my notes again, I think the next thing is recommended future agenda items. Something that came up today that I'd like to propose is, if there's anything to learn or be updated on, is that CalCHA program that we sort of signed up for somehow some months ago. Just curious to know how that's going, and if it's still a good deal, or with the economy being different, it's not ever going to, just would love to know what's happening with that. And then the other thing that occurs to me after our last meeting, where we were talking about the BMR inclusionary units and that their rent is going to be set at the top allowable rent in the range. And since so many of our affordable units are now coming to us through inclusionary agreements, just wondering how well that works for tenants. And I think I don't know if we yet have enough. We do have people living in Anton, Menlo, and some of the earlier market rate units. So I'm just wondering if we can ask the question and assess how well that is working. And I don't know what we'll do with the answer, but I think it would be good to know. Are people moving into a BMR unit and then finding they have to move out a year later because they no longer fit that narrow window? That's my fear. I hope it's exaggerate. But anyway, so that's a rough outline for suggested items to think about. Oh, I almost forgot. This is part update, part future agenda item suggestion. Today I had a meeting with Youth Leadership Institute and another organization that is a sort of community organizing group for Pacific Islander communities in this region. And they are having conversations about multi-unit smoke-free policies. which is something that this commission considered a couple of years ago after a grand jury report came out talking about the health hazards of your neighbor in a multi-unit apartment smoking and how it affects your health, the secondhand smoke that comes through the walls and through the vents and things. The health impacts are indisputable, but we declined to take it up because we were concerned about how it would be enforced, and would it be enforced in a way that was potentially, also a health hazard in a different way. So this conversation I had with these two advocates inspired me to think that the answer doesn't really have to be all yes or all no, but there could be things that we could do just to make tenants aware of resources like the tobacco program in the county, who can send a letter to a landlord if there's smoke in a unit that shouldn't be. A lot of leases don't allow smoking in multi-unit homes, and yet people smoke. And so there are resources that do not involve law enforcement or any other, or code enforcement or any like hammer type of enforcement, but could be helpful. So I am curious if there would be any interest in bringing that subject to us to consider. Short of enforcement, what can be done? And we're all really tired, so we can just jot it down for now. Or I can interpret your silence as there's no interest. Which way should I interpret it as? Rhonda, you're coming on camera. And maybe we can't do it because it's not on our work plan. That's another possibility.
Sure. I was just going to recommend that since this is an opportunity to propose future topics, that then the chair and vice chair review and make sure that the items are in alignment with the work plan, that we just add these to the list as members propose them, and then we follow up.
Once again, to follow up on things that other people have said, we mentioned the discussion of fees earlier.
Thank you.
And I don't know if refreshing some of that research, lifting it up might be something that we want to consider. Again, I do not remember if that is in alignment with our work plan, but it is something that certainly seems relevant.
I think that one is potentially, because it's sort of one of the administrative tasks that makes our work possible. But Rhonda and the vice chair and the chair and Rhonda can discuss that. Preview of my thoughts. Anything else for future meetings?
Getting clarity on the way the city's going in terms of housing element selection and structure of whatever group is going to be responsible for ushering that work through the community. In a previous cycle, they had an ad hoc group, and that was some housing commissioners, some planning commissioners, etc. But understanding the structure of that group. So that might be a staff sort of informational update type of item, but so that we can understand the plan.
Rhonda, do you think that can be part of the next item, which is staff updates?
Sure. Are you ready? Are you ready to move forward with that one?
I think we are.
I just about
unless you have something else.
Consultants getting selected this week, though, right? This Friday. So at our next meeting, you will have more information.
Yeah.
Sure. So with that would be my update. It's actually not, to my knowledge, being selected, but there's a panel that's been put together, a housing element consultant panel, to conduct interviews with the two consultants that submitted proposals. So that panel will be conducting those interviews on Friday and potentially making recommendations. So that at the next meeting, I can provide an outcome and an update on that process.
And I hope it's okay to share that the two proposals have different approaches to that question, Nevada. One of them is proposing that the Housing Commission sort of serve as the advisory body for the process. And the other is more like, I can't really, a little bit more like what you're describing, some commissioners from housing and planning and some community leaders, if I remember right. That one I don't remember as much because it was much like what we did last time, I think, and I wasn't part of it. But the other one I thought was different enough that I remember it. So if anybody has questions that you recommend be asked at the interviews, I am going to be on the panel, so I welcome your offline suggestions to me. Any other staff updates, Rhonda?
No, no other staff updates tonight. Thank you.
Okay. Wow, we get to adjourn then. All right. Thank you all. It was a long meeting. Not as long as last time, but see you next month, if not before.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Karen.